back to another edition of History in Your Own Backyard. I'm Susie Selleck, and today we're in Newport, Kentucky at the General James Taylor Mansion. I'm here with Sylvia Shively. Sylvia, thank you for having us here today.
Oh, I'm so glad you're here, and welcome to the General James Taylor Mansion.
It has been a pleasure hanging out with you, top to bottom here. And so let's just get to it. What has this home meant to the community, to the town of Newport?
Well, General Taylor came here in 1790 with his brother Hubbard, and they actually came with the purpose of setting up Newport. James Taylor came on behalf of his father, James Taylor, who actually fought in the Revolutionary War with General Washington. James Taylor, the father, we call him the senior, actually got his property through his service through the Revolutionary War. He got 500 acres per service year, so he had 15 acres here in Newport, which was being able to be established. And General Taylor, his son, which was James Taylor at the time, came here to actually survey the property for General Hall and his father, James Taylor.
Now, just so I'm clear, when they were serving, their payment was land.
Their payment was land in the Ohio and the Virginia Territory. Kentucky at that time was part of the Virginia Territory until Kentucky became a state in 1792.
Okay, all right. I don't think all of our listeners would our audience would maybe know that. So
yes.
just to put that there. Okay, so what has this building actually been used for in the past?
Well, the original home was built here in 1797, and it was actually a log cabin. And then in 1813, I believe it was, the mansion Belle Vue, which means beautiful view, was built here, and it was actually a Benjamin Latrobe home, and which means that it had, equal blocks of 60 feet, and it had wings on each side. And Benjamin Latrobe was actually the designer who actually designed the Capitol building in Washington, D.C. And General Taylor, on a trip to Washington, D.C., fell in love with a mansion that was along the Ohio River, and he actually wrote his cousin, James Madison, to see if he could get a copy of the plans for that home, and he actually built the home here. And in 1837, a disgruntled slave at the time burnt the mansion down, and the mansion was recreated and rebuilt in 1842.
I want to talk about that, but let's back up to this disgruntled slave. Talk to me a little bit about the history there, because it's a really cool story. So after Keturah, who I think you are just playing very beautifully here.
Thank you.
So after Keturah passed away, it was in James' will to make sure that all the slaves were free.
Okay. Actually, James Taylor passed away in 1848, and he freed all of his slaves at his death. Keturah continued to live on, and she actually lived in the home with her son, Colonel James Taylor, until later in life she moved with her daughter, Keturah Harris. Now, James Taylor inherited his slaves from his father from Orange County, Virginia, and Keturah nor James really wanted to have the slave issue. They treated their slaves very, very well.
Like family.
Like family.
Like family.
And in 1848, James Taylor, in his will, freed all the slaves. And mind you, this was before the Civil War, except for the one slave who burnt down the home. And that slave continued into the service of the family, even beyond freedom when the Civil War ended. And he is buried at Evergreen with the family. And also, they cared so much that when, at the time of his death in 1848, they also gave the people that they freed at that point 25 acres of land.
And animals.
And animals and donkey, which was a sign of wealth in those days. Yeah. So he really did care for his people. They saw him more as family than as slaves.
Sylvia, can you tell us if anybody famous has stopped by here?
I'm really glad you asked that. Yes, Lewis and Clark's expedition, which was set off by Thomas Jefferson, as you know, he was one of those explorer type. He actually sent them here, and they stayed here. And the dinosaur bones, which everybody knows Thomas Jefferson has, was dug up by General Taylor out at Big Bone Lake.
Oh, he dug them up?
He dug them up, and he had them here to send back to Thomas Jefferson. And when Lewis and Clark came back from out west, they stopped here and they picked them up. Okay. And they took them up. And as a matter of fact, James Taylor sent many items like crafting of peach trees, of strawberries and things that are still found at Monticello today. Other famous people, James Taylor was very big in political arena. Right. And a lot of congressmen, a lot of senators. And it is said we don't know this for a fact, but it is said that
Name drop
Abraham
it.
Lincoln actually came here. He was supposedly a person on James Taylor's ferry, and so he was here in the building. A lot of other famous people. The Prince of Wales has been in this building, and just so many numerous people that, and even in the modern era, we've had Helen Marie Taylor, ambassador to Ronald Reagan,
Yep.
UN ambassador that has been in this building. So, a lot of political connections and famous people.
I know Zachary Taylor lived in Kentucky. Now, was he ever here?
Actually, yes, he was actually a cousin of General Taylor, and he was actually stationed at the barracks here. Zachary was in the building at one point, and we actually have a couple notes from General Taylor's memoirs that state that Zachary Taylor was here. And, even though General Taylor wouldn't consider himself famous, he was actually very famous to the area, and he was such a promoter of the war effort of 1812. He was a brigadier general when he left and led with the Kentucky militia to the Battle of Detroit. And in Detroit, he was captured. And during his release, he was told that he could be released, but he was no longer allowed to serve the country, the United States at that point. So he became a quartermaster general and stayed here, and he supported the war effort by paying our soldiers, because our soldiers weren't paid except by affluent landowners at the time. And to this day, there's still discrepancy on whether General Taylor was paid back for his services, but he wouldn't consider himself famous, but I would.
What was it that James Taylor did on his deathbed?
On his deathbed, his cousin Zachary Taylor was running for president, and General Taylor was upstairs in these very rooms, and he was dying. He was on his deathbed. So he asked the judges and commissioners to come so that he could vote for his cousin. And the very last thing he said that day is, "I have shot my final shot for my country." And later that evening, he passed away.
And that was by voting?
By voting for his cousin, yes. The other story, which I think is kind of interesting, is that disgruntled slave story. Actually, after the fire that took place and it was rebuilt, General Taylor was very aware that it could happen again. So between the first and second floor, there are 16 inches of sand that is a suppression for fire. And recently, when we moved into the building and the fire department came in and we were talking about, updating and doing things, that was one of the things that were brought up, was that we had 16 inches, and they were amazed by that. So to me, that's a story that's amazing.
Oh, yeah.
And even to this day, on our conference room tables, we'll come in and sometimes find little pieces of sand, which is really cool.
Really, that is cool.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, goosebumps again.
Yeah.
There was a flood around here too.
Yeah. Oh yes.
So that flood was in 1937.
1937, and it was devastating to the Cincinnati area and to northern Kentucky. All of northern Kentucky was flooded, as was Ohio, and the mansion stayed intact. However, the tunnels, which we can get to a little bit later here, the tunnels were collapsing at that point. And as a matter of fact, the home next door, we heard from the residents who used to live there at the time that they had a turret on the side of their house that actually collapsed during that flood. So,
and that would have been cause of
the flood, yes, because all the building on the riverfront, we can't find the tunnels anymore because of all the building. But we do have stories that people have followed the tunnels up from the river up to the mansion prior to 1937.
I missed that earlier.
Yes.
Oh, that's killer.
I've got all these little secrets I can tell you.
And I love them, and they love them. So yeah. So are there more?
Well, I don't know if there's more tunnels now. We're still trying to explore that idea.
Right.
But, that's something for the future that we'll find them. But we have so many stories of kids that were here during Boy Scouts or during the prior funeral home that they actually saw or slid down through the old tunnels. And in the basement area, it's been extensively remodeled. But we have found that there's some wood floors where there really shouldn't be wood floors, and then when we've kind of pulled up a couple planks, we can see the old brick herringbone, especially in General Taylor's office in the basement.
General Taylor passed away in 1848, correct? Okay.
Correct.
What happened to the house after that?
Well, his son, Colonel James Taylor, inhabited the building with his wife, Susan Lucy Berry, and his mother was here for a little bit. But when Colonel James Taylor passed away, he placed the entire family estate in a trust. Yeah. The trust was managed for a few years by a very trusted executor. And after that time, then it moved over to another trustee, I should have said. And with that trustee, he started paring off the land, and the estate fell in a lot of disarray. And John Berry Taylor and his wife, Betty Washington Taylor, who happened to be the grandniece of General Washington, lived in the building. They had no children, and unfortunately, as the home went in disarray, they decided in 1888 to purchase the building back from the trust. So they purchased their family home from the very trust that was keeping it up. John Berry Taylor owned and managed the bank here. So he was wealthy in his own right. And of course, Betty Washington Taylor would have been as well.
Right.
So in 1888, they reoriented the building. It used to face the river when the family was here. And in 1888, they reoriented, took down the wings, which were again in disarray because the trust wasn't supporting it, and brought the home into modern era with oil lamps, and just brought the building back into a more modern setting. Right. And brought in some grandeur back into the home at that point.
Was the architect the same? Was it, or no?
It was more at that point would have been a Greek revival style before it was a federal style. So the home displays many different styles of architect. Okay. But yes, Benjamin Latrobe, the footprint, except when they took away the wings, it's still Benjamin Latrobe home because it has some signature pieces of Benjamin Latrobe, as evidenced in the motif at the top of the grand staircase.
Okay. When Betty Washington died, what happened to the house at that point?
At that point, again, like I said, John Berry had already passed away, and Betty Washington Taylor lived here for quite some time, and they had no children. So when she passed away in 1917, the home went in a great disrepair, and the county purchased or sold it at tax sale. And von der Harstetter Funeral Home purchased it at tax sale for $5,000. And that was in 1919. They began the funeral home, and they occupied the home until 1991 when another law firm had the building. David and Maureen Gerner purchased the building in 2004, and they restored it back to its grandeur. They are very good stewards of history and the Taylor family, and they've brought it lovingly back. The future for the Taylor Mansion holds, it is still the executive offices of the law firm of Gerner and Kearns. Yep. And we continue to work out of this building. It is a working law firm, and we do have tours upon request, and we still have the historicals come through and have meetings and things here. But the future would hold that we continue to have a presence in the building and continue to make it a historical, significant property in Newport and share the history. And that's one of the big things that the Gerners wanted. This settee we're sitting on is an actual piece from the Taylor. It is a Taylor piece. And as you said, there are paintings here in the building, and the wardrobe upstairs it is lovingly kept, and we've restored a lot of the stained glass and things here in the building just to bring this grand lady back to where she was.
Thank you for watching another edition of History in Your Own Backyard. I'm Susie Selleck, and today we are in Newport, Kentucky at the General James Taylor Mansion, Sylvia, thank you so much for having
Well,
us.
thank you very much for sharing our history and our story.
No, it's been awesome. Remember, travel slowly and stop often. Bye for now.